Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about 8.7, which is introducing the quadratic formula to you. Kind of cool, different than anything you've ever done. Let me take you way back in your mind, back to like the end of mod 60. Back to 6.6, 6.7, when you had things like x squared plus a bx plus a c. That's a trinomial. Remember, you had to factor those out and figure out, what in the world could I multiply to get this, but add to get this? And so then you had to end up figuring out how that would work. X and an X plus something, and figure out what combinations went in there. Sometimes there was guessing and checking. Sometimes you could just solve it. Well, I'm going to show you an easier way. I should say a different way. Some people find it easier. It takes a little memory. You have to memorize a formula to do it, but takes out the guess and check. Now, in these quadratic equations, remember, an equation has to have an equals. So you want it set equal to 0, okay? Now, in this is my a, x squared plus bx plus c equaling 0. Each of these terms is going to carry a very special place in the quadratic formula. So here's what the quadratic formula says. X, and that's what you're going to be solving for. They're going to give you this big long trinomial equal to 0, and you have to figure out what x would be to make this a true statement. So x equals negative b, so whatever b is, you're going to do negative b, plus or minus, so you're going to end up with two different answers going on here. The square root of b squared minus 4ac, so 4 times your a times your c, all divided by 2a. And again, in my class, I don't force you guys to memorize formulas. You just have to know how to use them. So when it comes time for your test, I will give you this formula, but you have to know how to plug into it. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's do an application of this. So let's say I were to give you this trinomial equation, 5x squared plus 8x equals a negative 3. Well, off the bat, we got something wrong because it's not set equal to 0. So we need to solve this and move it around so that it's set equal to 0. So I know that I can add 3 to both sides so that I make that right side equal to 0. So now I have 5x squared plus 8x plus 3 equaling 0. Now I have a trinomial set equal to 0, so I can plug in to that quadratic equation. And again, the quadratic equation says I can find x if I have a negative b. Remember, this is my a, this is my b, and this is my c. Okay? So I have a negative b, so negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which would be 8 squared, minus 4 times a times c, and the whole thing divided by 2a. Okay? So now all you have to do is you just have to clean it up. You just have to solve the math of it. So I would start out, remember that whole please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. You want to do your order of operations. So you want to first do your exponents. So I end up, and I'm just going to end up copying this a couple times over, negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared is 64 minus 4ac over my 2a. Okay? So that's where I am now. Next step is going to be getting rid of my multiplying or dividing from left to right. So I'm going to get a lot of multiplication going on in here. Let me close that multiplication symbol. So I'm going to scoot over to this side. So I'm going to copy down again my negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64. So now I have 5 times 4 is 15 times negative 4 is going to give me a negative 60. All divided by my 2 times 5 gives me 10. So I'm getting a little cleaner. So x is going to equal that stuff. Okay? So now I have x, it's going to equal negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 60 gives me the square root of 4 all over 10. Well, I know the square root of 4 is going to be 2. So, or, well, I'll just keep working down. So x equals negative 8 plus or minus 2 over 10. Still looks kind of messy. So now I got to break it off into two answers. So negative 8 plus 2 gives me a negative 6 over 10. Or negative 8 minus 2 gives me a negative 10 over 10. So x is going to equal a negative 6/10, which is what, a negative 3/5, or negative 10 over 10, which is just 1. Good? Oopsie, negative 1. My bad. Negative 10 over 10 gives me a negative 1. So for your quadratic equations, oftentimes you will have two answers. Hence that plus or minus. It's going to end up letting you have two answers. All right. And let's see, as you work on through 8.7, you're just going to continue on plugging in to the quadratic equation. The biggest thing I can say is make sure you're set up as ax squared plus bx plus c equaling 0. If you need to manipulate your equation like we did up here so that it equals 0, do that first before you begin plugging in. And always make sure you have your equation copied down right so you're plugging it in accurately. And this will save you a lot of time, because imagine if you had to set this up like we did back in 60, where you had to do x and x, you would end up with a negative minus 3/5 and equaling a negative 1. That would have taken you a ton of time to solve and figure out that combination. So again, this is probably a faster route, just requires some remembering a formula and plugging in accurately. Good luck!